There is this invisible reality playing out right now, literally, in the room you are sitting in.
Yeah, it's constantly running in the background.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every single time you swipe a screen or click a link or even just ask your virtual assistant to set a timer, you are feeding this massive hidden architecture.
Which is something we don't really think about during our day-to-day routines.
Right. And we have been told for years now that this technology, this constant connectivity, is democratizing the world, that it is, leveling the playing field for everyone.
Right, that's the standard industry narrative. We look at our devices and we see tools of empowerment.
But what if the exact opposite is true? What if the tools are actually using us?
Well, behind that glass screen is a highly sophisticated system of extraction.
So today's deep dive is a really comprehensive exploration of the 2026 book, The Price of Progress. How does artificial intelligence amplify the social gap? By Julio Chai.
It's a fantastic text, very eye-opening.
It really is.
Uh-huh.
And our mission today is to decode how artificial intelligence is silently reorganizing global wealth, work, and power. We want to help you, the listener, really understand your place in this entirely new algorithmic economy.
Because it affects all of us.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core premise here is that AI isn't just a convenient tool. Chai frames it as a structural force that is actively accelerating global inequality.
Yeah, and to really grasp that, we are going to encourage you to question that comfortable narrative of inevitable progress.
Which is hard to do, honestly.
It is, but Chai's work forces us to look past the shiny surface of these apps and examine the underlying data. Because when you look at the raw numbers, the whole story of democratization it falls apart entirely.
Right, so to understand this social gap, we have to start at the very foundation of the AI revolution. We need to look at who actually owns the raw material.
The underlying infrastructure.
Exactly, because, we all grew up with this illusion of the open internet, right?
Yeah.
This utopian, decentralized web where anyone can start a blog and have a voice.
That was the dream of the early web.
But Chai points out that the stark reality is one of extreme technological concentration. And he introduces this concept called the 1090 rule.
Yeah, the 1090 rule. It basically states that a tiny fraction of global actors, roughly 10%, controls 90% of the artificial intelligence infrastructure.
Wow.
So that's the data centers, the proprietary models, and even the specialized engineering talent. It's all incredibly concentrated.
10% controlling 90%. That is a staggering bottleneck. And we aren't just talking about a few servers humming in some basement, right?
Not at all.
Chai notes that every single day, the world produces over 300 quintillion bytes of data.
Which is a number most of us can't even visualize.
It's unfathomable.
Yeah.
And the top 5 tech companies in the world now have market caps that completely exceed the gross domestic product of many actual nations.
Yeah, entire countries. And it represents this fundamental shift in how value is created today. We often hear the phrase, data is the new oil.
Right. People say that all the time.
But that implies data is just a static resource, sitting in the ground waiting to be extracted by whoever finds it first.
Like striking a well.
Exactly. But Chai argues data isn't like oil at all. It is generated constantly by human activity.
By us.
Yes. It's you checking your map for traffic this morning. It's you scrolling through a feed while waiting in line for coffee.
Just living your life.
Right. Yet the financial value of your daily activity is extracted by a very select few. It creates this invisible accumulation of wealth where the data you produce is essentially worth more than you are as an individual, at least in the eyes of the system.
He calls it an invisible river, which is just such a vivid way to picture it.
It really is.
Because most of us, the average people, we just live on the banks of this river. Yeah. We are generating the data, simply by living our digital lives.
We provide the flow.
Right. But a few massive tech giants have gone downstream and built colossal dams to capture all the energy engulfed from that water. Whoever controls those sluice gates decides which territories get irrigated and which are just left to dry up.
That's the perfect way to visualize it.
It is like playing a game of Monopoly, where one player starts the game already owning all the hotels on the board.
Good luck winning that game.
Right. You are just rolling the dice and handing over your cash every single turn. It really makes you wonder, does the average person even realize that their daily digital habits, liking a post, mapping a route, tracking a workout, are essentially unpaid labor feeding this new capital.
What's fascinating here is how this algorithmic capital differs entirely from traditional industrial capital.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about a physical factory. A factory scales linearly. If you want to double your output of cars, you generally need to build another factory, right?
Hire more workers, buy more steel?
Exactly. It takes massive physical investment and years of planning, but algorithms scale exponentially. They improve with every single piece of data they process, and they do it at a near zero marginal cost.
So they just get better and better on their own.
Yeah. Yes. The player with the hotels in your monopoly analogy isn't just collecting rent. Their hotels are automatically upgrading themselves into skyscrapers every single time you pass go.
Wow. That creates a nearly insurmountable barrier to entry for anyone else trying to get into the game.
Completely.
I mean, startup can't just compete because they simply don't have the decade of user data the giant already collected.
A moat is just too wide.
Yeah. But hoarding the data is only half the equation here.
Yeah.
The real danger isn't just the data sitting quietly in a server, it's what the algorithm does when it pushes that data back out into the real world to make decisions about us.
And this is where Chai talks about the digital Matthew effect.
Right. Drawing from that old adage, to those who have, more will be given. And to those who have not, even what they have will be taken away.
Exactly. Chai argues that AI acts as a geometric multiplier of inequality.
Because if the starting point is already unequal, and it is, right? I mean, he notes the top 1% of the world owns over 45% of the wealth, while the bottom 50% has less than 1%.
Which is already a massive gap.
So AI mathematically expands that gap. But here's where it gets really interesting. Wait, aren't algorithms just math?
That's the defense you hear most often.
Yeah. How can a mathematical equation be prejudiced? A calculator doesn't care about your background. So how does a machine actually learn human flaws?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to remember that algorithms optimize for efficiency.
Right.
They do not optimize for equity. An algorithm doesn't have a moral compass or inherent values. It operates as a mirror.
A mirror?
Yes, it learns from historical data. And according to Chai's research, that historical data is deeply infused with our past human biases, human decisions, and structural inequalities.
So it's looking backward to predict the future.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Imagine an automated system used for evaluating job applicants or determining credit scores for a bank.
Okay.
If the historical data it trains on shows that certain demographics were less likely to be hired for executive roles or maybe less likely to be approved for a mortgage.
Perhaps due to decades of systemic discrimination.
Right. The algorithm simply identifies that historical pattern as the efficient rule for success.
Oh, wow.
It then penalizes those marginalized communities moving forward. But it masks that discrimination under a veneer of objective, unquestionable math. It gives the bias a mathematical alibi.
A mathematical alibi. That's such a powerful phrase. It makes the math feel a lot less innocent.
It's very intentional phrasing by Chai.
And this ties directly into what he calls the black box. Because a lot of people hear the term neural networks and they just think of a really smart computer. They don't realize how opaque these systems actually are.
Opaque is the right word. Neural networks are inspired by the human brain. They find patterns in millions of data points without being explicitly programmed with rules for every single scenario.
So the programmers don't even tell it exactly what to do.
Right. The engineers know what data goes in and they know what decision comes out. But the middle layers, those hidden layers where the machine makes millions of microscopic calculations and weighting adjustments, they are this dense web of logic that humans literally cannot read or untangle.
That is terrifying. Just imagine applying for a mortgage.
Sure.
The bank teller looks at a screen and says, "You are denied." You ask why. And they just say, "Well, I don't know. The AI said no."
And that's exactly what's happening today.
You can't argue with a formula that nobody in the building even understands. When an algorithm denies you a loan, there is no human reasoning to appeal to. The computer just becomes the ultimate unquestionable judge.
And these mathematical biases don't just live in some abstract cloud server. They dictate human livelihoods down here on the ground.
Yeah. Real-world consequences.
Which brings us to how AI is completely rewriting the global job market and how it is actually changing the very definition of poverty.
Yeah, let's get into that because the transformation of the labor market is perhaps the most immediate shockwave people are actually feeling right now.
Absolutely.
Chai cites international reports indicating that nearly 40% of jobs globally are exposed to automation.
It's a huge number.
Wait, 40%? Let's interrogate that number for a second, because does that mean 40% of people will be completely unemployed, or does it mean 40% of our daily tasks just change?
That's an important distinction.
Because there's a big difference between losing my job entirely and just, having to use a new software tool at my desk.
It is definitely more nuanced than just mass unemployment. The impact isn't some uniform wave of job losses across the board. It leads to what economists call job polarization.
Job polarization.
Chai explains that routine, predictable jobs are the ones being absorbed by the machines.
Like factory work.
Right, manual labor on an assembly line. But it also heavily includes routine cognitive work. So, data entry clerks, basic accounting, entry-level paralegal work analyzing documents.
So white-collar work, too. The middle of the economy is just hollowing out.
Meanwhile, the highly specialized cognitive roles, so the people who actually design the AI systems, manage complex business strategies, or offer deep creative insights, they see massive gains in productivity and wealth.
So the middle class erodes, while the extremes just grow further apart.
Exactly.
Chai notes a specific forecast for 2030, which is just around the corner. He says 85 million jobs could be displaced, while 97 million new jobs might be created.
On paper, that looks like a net positive.
Right, we are up 12 million jobs. But the friction of that transition is brutal. I mean, the person who just lost their job doing routine data entry rarely has the highly specialized skills required to just step into a newly created machine learning management role.
No, it's a completely different skill set. The worker loses their income, their identity, and their place in the economy. The new jobs created might as well be on another planet for them.
So what does this all mean? If we bring this directly to your career, you, the listener, sitting out there right now, Chai introduces a concept that completely redefines how we think about being disconnected. He calls it algorithmic poverty.
This is one of the most vital concepts in the book. We used to think the digital divide was simply about hardware, right? Who had internet access and who didn't.
Yeah, did you have a computer at home or not?
But algorithmic poverty argues that today, you can have a smartphone in your pocket, high-speed Wi-Fi, active social media accounts, and still be living in structural poverty.
Because you are structurally excluded from the wealth-generating parts of the digital economy.
Precisely.
You lack the advanced digital literacy, the critical thinking skills, and the specialized knowledge to actually leverage AI. You're a consumer of the algorithm rather than a commander of it.
You are generating value for the system, like we talked about with the invisible river, without extracting any value for yourself.
Chai uses a brilliant analogy here, but I kind of want to adapt it to make it even more concrete.
Go for it.
Think about algorithmic poverty like a library catalog. Imagine going to a library where the catalog only shows you books based on the last book you read.
Okay, an algorithmic library.
Yeah. So if you start with a basic picture book, the system assumes that's your reading level. It hides the advanced encyclopedias, the textbooks, the complex novels. It hides them from you entirely. It limits your horizon to what it assumes you can handle.
That's a great way to put it.
So in the AI economy, if you don't know how to prompt a language model to automate your workflow, the algorithm just keeps feeding you consumer entertainment. It traps you in a loop.
This raises an important question about the speed of adaptation, because throughout history, human societies have adapted to technological revolutions.
Sure, we survived the Industrial Revolution.
Right. The Industrial Revolution displaced agricultural workers, but eventually we built new educational systems and established labor laws.
Eventually being the key word.
Exactly. Here is the critical difference with AI. Machines today learn and iterate in a matter of weeks.
Or even days.
Yeah. But human societies, our institutions, our educational systems, they take generations to reform.
That temporal mismatch is terrifying. You can't put a displaced worker on pause for 20 years while the public school system catches up and figures out how to teach AI literacy.
You really can't.
If the speed of machines is outpacing the speed of society, the traditional narrative we've been sold about inevitable progress is fundamentally broken. It is an illusion.
And the illusion of progress is a powerful framing from the book. We look at rising GDPs, skyrocketing tech stocks, and incredible AI breakthroughs, and we naturally think the world is thriving.
It looks great on a chart.
But Chai reminds us that this macroeconomic growth hides a deeply fragmented world. While we are sitting here discussing advanced AI prompting, there are still 2.6 billion people on this planet who lack basic, reliable internet access.
2.6 billion. They aren't even in the library you just described.
Not even in the building.
But And I think this is really important. Chai is also very clear that AI is not some inevitable destiny.
No, not at all.
It isn't an alien force that landed on Earth and is dictating terms to us. It is a human construct, which means it can be redirected. The technology itself isn't the enemy here.
That's a crucial point. The book points to highly positive applications of AI that are already happening right now.
Like what?
Well, think about AI-assisted medical diagnostics. Those are being deployed in remote areas that have a severe shortage of specialized doctors.
Oh, that's amazing.
Or personalized adaptive learning platforms in education, systems that tailor lessons to a student's exact pace and learning style. It can identify exactly where a student struggles with a math concept and adjust the teaching method instantly.
So it's leveling them up instead of trapping them.
Exactly. These are examples where efficiency and equity are actually aligned.
So the solution requires a massive paradigm shift. We have to move from just maximizing raw efficiency and corporate profits to balancing innovation with equity.
And Chai outlines some major steps to get there.
Right, he talks about robust data governance. So individuals actually have rights over the data they produce, maybe even getting compensated for feeding that invisible river.
Which would fundamentally change the economy.
He also brings up modern antitrust policies to break up those massive dams hoarding the water. And he demands algorithmic transparency, forcing that black box to be opened up and audited for bias.
We have to know how the decisions are made.
Plus, a total overhaul of global education.
Yeah.
Focused on critical thinking and adaptability, not just teaching kids to write code that an AI will write better tomorrow anyway.
Which is a huge undertaking.
It is. And I have to push back here, just to be grounded in reality for a second.
Sure.
Is it really realistic to expect these massive tech giants, these trillion-dollar companies, to just hand over the keys to their dams?
That's a fair question.
Are they really going to voluntarily share the river, open up their black boxes, and sacrifice their profit margins? Or does society have to force their hand?
Well, history tells us that power rarely concedes voluntarily. But history also shows us that technological trajectories can absolutely be shaped by collective action and rigorous regulation. Think back to the Industrial Revolution again.
Okay.
Factory owners didn't voluntarily decide to implement the weekend or abolish child labor or establish workplace safety standards just because they suddenly felt generous.
Definitely not.
Those were hard-won regulatory victories driven by collective social pressure.
So society forced the machine to serve the human, rather than the other way around.
Exactly. Progress isn't automatic. It is a deliberate choice. We have to choose to build regulatory frameworks that ensure artificial intelligence serves the public good. We have to demand accountability from the systems making decisions about our lives.
Wow. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We have demystified Chai's 1090 rule, showing how a tiny fraction of the world controls the infrastructure of our future.
A very small fraction.
We exposed how algorithms aren't just calculators, but mathematical mirrors that geometrically multiply our existing human inequalities through the Matthew effect.
Right.
We explored the hollowing out of the middle class and the rise of algorithmic poverty, where you can be hyper-connected but still structurally excluded. And finally, we realized that true progress requires deliberate, ethical design and collective action.
That's a lot to process.
It is. To you, listening right now, the most immediate takeaway is that your digital literacy is your greatest defense. Every single time you interact with an algorithm, you are part of its feedback loop.
You're feeding the river.
So stay curious. Question the output you are handed. Ask yourself why a platform is showing you a specific piece of information or denying you a specific opportunity. Remember that behind that sleek interface, the code was written by humans, with human flaws, human biases, and human motives.
And that leads to a final, lingering concept that builds upon Chai's work.
What's that?
We established that AI acts as a mirror, reflecting our current societal flaws, our historical data biases, and our deep-seated inequalities.
Right, the mirror analogy.
But what happens when this mirror becomes the permanent blueprint for future generations? If we do not actively intervene right now to correct the inequalities in the training data and the algorithms today, we are at risk of doing something irreversible.
Because it just scales exponentially.
Exactly. We risk hard-coding our current human prejudices into the very operating system of human civilization. We could be quietly constructing a digital caste system, an architecture of exclusion that future generations may never be able to delete.
That is a haunting thought. So the next time you swipe your screen, remember the invisible architecture you are feeding. Are you building a bridge or are you building a wall? keep questioning, keep learning. Until next time.